Hello, this is Susan from S.A. Mitchell Creations, and today we're going to be making a little bunny gift bag. It has a tail, some ears, it's lined, and it's a drawstring style. The size is easy to modify. You can make it longer without much problem. So for this project, we're going to need, for this particular size, 4 pieces that are 7 inches across by 6 inches deep, high. And I have 2 pieces for the outside fabric, 2 pieces for the lining inside. I have 2 pieces for the casing, and this is the casing right here on the top. So I wanted it to match my outside fabric. So that is 1 1/4 inches wide by 7 inches long. And we have the bunny ears. These are 2 inches by 5 inches. We need 4 pieces. I had them match my lining. I have 2 pieces of interfacing for the ears, so those are also 2 inch by 5 inches each. I have ribbon. It's about 1/4 inch ribbon. At 1 meter long is plenty. Then I have the tail and a little bow for the ear. And then some of the notions you'll need is just some fabric or white glue, something to cut your fabric, the matching thread, something to mark, and a ruler. This is a very simple project, and like I said, you can just omit the ears and tail and use it as a regular gift bag pattern as well. So one of the first things I do, as you see here, is I've notched out the corners. All 4 pieces, I have cut the corners, and I'll show you how. So here's my lining pieces. I'll put the right sides together. And you can either take your ruler, or I have a grid right here on my cutting board. And I've just marked 1/2 inch. So I just mark it like this and square it off. Or like I said, you can use your ruler. Mark it off, square it off. Next, you can do them individually, or just as long as your corners match. Trying to see what I'm doing here. And that's as easy as that is. 1/2 inch will give us roughly, I believe, a 1 inch box bottom. So that's going to be our bottom size. If you want a deeper bag, just make these corner pieces a little bit bigger. Okay, we'll go over to the board in a few minutes to press that. Okay, so for the bunny ears, we have 4 pieces like this. And what we want to do is put right sides together. Okay, I have 2 of them. Fold it in half, and I line it up with the grid on my table. Mark it at 1/2. This is the fold, so we want to keep that and not cut that. So mark at 1 inch, and you don't want to cut straight at a 45 unless you want a really pointy ear. Just kind of round it a bit. Most of the time I don't mark it, I just cut in a little bit of a semicircle. And you get a nice little ear. It softens up as you sew it here. Okay, so now we're going to go to the ironing board and do the work that we need there. So here at the ironing board, you want to press all your pieces. I pressed the body and the lining. I'm going to press my ears. I just have it set on cotton. Some of these creases are kind of stubborn. Fabric has a memory. If you actually, for some of them, for some fabrics, if you iron it and just don't touch it for a minute, I've read that it will stay better than if you just pick it up right away. So we'll try that. And my casing pieces. So now I want to make sure that I have the proper ears lined up here. That one goes here. So those two match. And I want to put interfacing on just one ear on each. Now what I have here is a Teflon mat. I love it. The glue from the interfacing won't ruin my ironing board. And it peels off and it's not sticky afterwards. I bought mine on Amazon. Follow the manufacturer's instructions for the interfacing. This is SF101. Any lightweight will do. You just want something in the ears so they perk up a little bit. Now I'm not going to trim around mine because after I sew, I'll be trimming them. But I want to keep my matching pieces together. Now, for my casing, this is trickier. You can use your ruler, mark it out at 1/4 inch, and fold twice, 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch, so it's a little 1/4 inch fold in. Mine's a comfortable finger fold for me is 1/4 inch, so I've just learned to do that. As long as it's a minimum of about 1/4 inch each time, this will work for you. And then it's a little hot, fold it in half. And the same with the second one. Okay, so I'm at my machine. I have my white thread in and I have my stitch at a 3. Something I forgot to mention is these little bows that I use. You can buy at any craft location. Usually they're in the form of a sticker. And I just take the sticker portion off and glue it or stitch it on. Okay, so here we are. Let's do our ears first. So what I like to do, find my marking pen. Is mark where I want to be as I'm sewing. I'm going to make a little bit smaller seam. Usually I go between 1/8 and 1/4. And these are the tips of the ears. So I want to make sure that I end up, I don't know if you can see the little purple dots, when I sew, that's my pivot point, just so it's consistent. So I'm going to go between 1/8 and 1/4 inch. Needle down, back stitch, and up to my mark. And then I start my turn. I go up to my pivot point again on the tip. And again, I turn. Back stitch. So if you can see all the way around, now what I'm going to do is trim just a tiny bit closer, cut off the corners so there's less bulk, and then also I'm going to turn it inside out, iron it, and top stitch it. So here we are. We have our stitched ear. We're going to trim it just a tiny bit closer. And I just make a point of cutting these corners off. I'll turn it inside out. My handy dandy clamp. Just be gentle pulling. You probably won't find these in a sewing store. My dad actually gave these to me. Probably find it in a science shop doing dissections. We're going to press that. Now something I noticed, I actually want the layer with the interfacing to be up, because you can see the seam through the fabric on that side. So we're going to just press. And now we'll go back and top stitch. So again, I want to mark the top of my ear, my pivot points for my top stitching. About 1/8 of an inch in for my pivot point, just so it's lined up nice. I'm not turning before my corners actually start. For my top stitch, I usually bump it up a few stitch sizes. So if I sew at a 3, I go to maybe a 3.5 for this little craft. Top stitching it at 1/8 inch. Just turn it slightly and then follow a little curve till I'm at the next pivot point. And then I'm on a home run. Back stitch. And that is what it should look like. These little marks will disappear with a dab of water. Now we'll do the second one. Again, I have my marks in place, 1 inch. 1/8 inch in, and just to get this started, back stitch, up to my pivot point, some are a little bit more curved than others. Oops, one more stitch up. And way down. Now, right away, I always lower my stitch length down so I don't forget. So now we have our 2 ears. And if I can move this a little bit, we want to start assembling the bag. So we want one body piece, one lining, casing, and we're going to do our ears right away on this piece. So we are going to mark the center. We're going to just fold this in half. Fold our casing in half. I just literally make a little tick. Now on the top, remember we have squares cut at the bottom, so we want to be on the other side on the top here. And we want to center our casing. We want to fold it the way we ironed it here. And line up our marks. Start with the center. And work your way out to each corner. Make sure your seams on the edges are lined up, because you will see if they're not. And we're going to put our ears on. We're going to do right side up. I just center it. We still have our center line right here. I just put it close. Usually my clip's right in the center. I just hug it on each side of that clip. You can see that. And then pin it. Hug it on that side and line everything up on the same edge. Then we're going to take our lining piece, and again, the corners are at the bottom and the straight continuous edge is at the top, and we're just going to line up the corners and pin this all across, everything together. Okay, so my stitch is back down to 3. I'm going to sew it 1/4 inch again. Needle down, and then I do a couple stitches, back stitch, and I'm sewing through all the layers. So when we turn it the right side way, this is the back of our bag, which is perfect. So now we're going to do the same thing with the last 3 pieces. We're going to mark the center. Fold it in half, just make a little tick. This one we don't need to. The casing, fold in half. Make a little tick. And then line up the centers. Make sure your little seam that you ironed in, you don't have to stitch that. It all gets caught in this top seam. Haven't had a problem with it unraveling it. Make sure it's lined up though. turn that piece in again. I'm trying to do it so my hands aren't in the way. And then you notice how there's a little space there. That's because we have to sew a seam here, but we need our ribbon to go through the casing, so we can't sew over top. Now again, place your lining piece over top, lining up the corners. Your notched ends should be matched, lined up at the bottom. And we're going to sew straight across again, 1/4 inch. Needle down. These are small enough seams, I don't bother trimming them down. So now you got 2 sides of your bag. So what you have to do, you're going to put right sides together. If you can see. So the pattern, the nice side, the pattern pieces together, match them. So this is the outside, these are the inside linings. Flatten your ears out so they don't get caught in any seams. And it all the way around so all your notches line up nicely. You can see that. Those notches are what's going to make our bag have a little depth to it. It helps it sit up too. Gives it a flat bottom. Okay, so I pinned my corners. Now I'm going to try to line up my side seams here. Try to flatten it out. Line it up. Now I line mine up looking at about 1/4 inch in because that's where my sew line is going to be. If you line up only the tip here, sometimes it can be off. It doesn't matter which way those fold. These existing seams. Just make sure it's flattened when you're lining them up. You can just finger press them. If it's a problem, use your iron. So mine are lined up, and I pin it again. So what you want to do, I'm just going to use my marker. So on the lining piece, you have to leave an opening so you can turn this inside out. So on the very bottom, I just make marks where I'm going to stop and start so that I remember while I'm sewing. Very simple. You can put more clips or pins in if you like. I just find as long as your corners and your seams are lined up, you can kind of straighten it out as you go. So again, 1/4 inch seams. And I'm gonna just take that off. When you start, you have the back stitch so your seam doesn't come out, you're stitching. Now, using the cutter on my machine all the time doesn't always give the nicest stops and starts, but it's all going to be hidden. Now, I'm going to adjust this a little bit, so make sure your needle's down. I just want to make sure this is all lined up nice. I'm going to take my clip out, but I'm going to keep my finger here so it doesn't move. And then I'm going to make sure this piece is lined up. If you find your boxes aren't lining up as you're sewing, one of your feet, it could be pulling more or stretching as you're sewing. That's what's great about a walking foot, is the top and the bottom move at the same time. My older machines, I could buy a foot attachment that I attached, and I almost always, 90% of the time, 99% of the time, use my walking foot. But if it moves on you, you can just trim this a little bit, re-notch your corners as long as they're the same. It's not horrible. So I'm just going to go all the way around. Here's the seam we want to line up again. Get as close as I can with my fingers. Now it doesn't look like we're going to have much of a bottom, but those little cutouts do marvelous work. Half an inch will give you about a 1-inch bottom. So if you cut it an inch, you'll have double that. You'll have like 2 inches. Okay, so I've sewn all the way around. Now it's time to do our corners. So you want to take your piece, you want to open it up. And if you can see, we want to line up our seams. And you can push those either way. Doesn't matter, as long as that inside seam is lined up nicely. And then you'll kind of have that shape. And you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam there. Again, these are small enough seams, I don't bother trimming them down. They don't seem to cause too much bulk. And on all 4 corners you do the same thing. You can put them opposites, you can put them the same way. In the end you won't be able to tell. These are the outsides. These will be seen. So if you have to take your time to make it look just a little neater. I try not to start right on the edge because I find it knots up too much and causes me a problem. So if you notice, when I put my needle down, I'm stitching backwards before I am forwards. It just helps it not jam up. Okay, now let's turn it inside out. Or right side out. My daughter, she's 6, she keeps correcting me. Right side out, Mommy. Poke your corners out nicely. So that's your little 1-inch bottom. Trim all the excess threads. Okay. Now, one last thing we have to do here is we have to sew closed our little opening. It's just, you can see here. Here's your lining where the opening was. You just kind of pull it and tuck that in. It folds in nice. We're just going to sew a top stitch. Nobody sees it. It'll just be about 1/8, just enough to close that up. My markings are still there from when I marked where I was going to leave my opening. Needle down. I'm going to adjust this. And just make sure you catch both layers to close that up. Now, because I'll see this one, I'm going to just trim this up a little bit better. Okay, tuck that in. Now we will press one more time at the ironing board. And we have one more top stitching to do. I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back and we're going to top stitch. So I'm going to put my length at 3.5 again. And what we want to do is top stitch around underneath on this part. I like to start between the casings on the side. And I'm going to actually turn mine inside out. Again, I don't have a removable arm. If you do, then you don't have to turn yours inside out. I'm just going to line it up. I like to do a 1/8 top stitch, nothing too wide. Okay, get this going. There. Okay, let's get this going. I usually start with the back. That way I know if I'm getting what I want, because I can either take it apart or start on the side a little deeper if I wanted to. I like to flatten that a little bit. That's where all your seams are coming together underneath. You don't have to do exactly 1/8. Find a spot on your foot that you like and just always use that, or mark it with a marker after you measure it once. Needles down every time I lift to adjust it. This part you really want to do well, because this is what people see. Okay, so what I did was I didn't like the way my stitch started. It kind of knotted up a little bit, so I just took out that beginning portion and I'm going to just go over top of it. The seam was a little thick where I started. There we go. And we'll backstitch. Okay, any excess pieces of thread just remove. Turn it right side out. Okay, now we're on the home stretch. Okay, so now our final little touches. With my iron, I just sprayed a little water wherever I had markings, because the water makes my markings disappear. I'll take my ribbon and I cut it to 1 meter, so I'm just going to cut that in half. I don't have my scissors here. I have a pin, just a safety pin. And basically what you're going to do is go through the front, Now we didn't sew those turns down, so just make sure your pin goes between. Usually there's not much of a problem. Just now. There we go. Oh. And then we're going to go through the back. And just so we don't lose those ends, we're going to tie them now. This is just an organza ribbon. You can use any kind, about 1/4 inch wide. I just cut that on a 45. And then your next piece, I'm going to put a pin through that, and we're going to go the opposite way. So this is where your knot is. We're going to start on this end. Doesn't matter if it's in front or behind, they work the same. And again, tie it in a knot. I just like to cut the ends on a 45. Now there's 2 things to do. I have fabric glue. This is just from Walmart. It's very nice glue. There's another one, I believe it's called High Tack. Same place. I think it's about $6 to $8. And it holds up. As soon as I glue it and hold it just for a moment, it stays. Now, one thing I did on my other bags is I just did a little zigzag here, and just to hold it down, but the glue is pretty good. I'll just glue it this time. And then in the same spot, we're going to put her little bow. And then on the back, his tail, her tail. That's cute. So that is the little bag, and then you can just pull it and adjust the ears. So what we're going to do, we're going to fill up our other bag that we made with some Easter treats. These ones actually take quite a bit. You could probably put a little toy in there. That's why I called it a little bit of a gift bag, not just a treat bag. So you have your bunny ears and your tail. You can just let those dangle, or you could tie them into a bow. But it sits quite nice with your 1-inch corners. And there you go, your little bunny bag. Thanks for watching.